You all are getting a beat today because I am just so happy right now. WashU students, WashU community, if you're watching this, thank you. My name is Karinton Triplett, and I'm just so honored to be hosting the Center for Diversity and Inclusion at Washington University in St. Louis's Undiscovered Stories of BIPOC Women. We are at the end of Women's History Month, but that does not mean that we can't still celebrate. So the discussion for today's virtual panel is a conversation about the BIPOC or BIPOC acronym by reflecting on our experiences as BIPOC women. Women represented in the BIPOC acronym have every right to tell people who are not doing their own research to Google it. But sometimes the nuances in our distinct narratives are powerful to hear, not just for non-people of color, but for ourselves. Audre Lorde affirms this as a strength, offering that the strength of women lies in recognizing differences between us as creative and in standing to those distortions which we inherited without blame, but which are now ours to alter. BIPOC, as an acronym for Black and Indigenous people and people of color, works to acknowledge these distinct experiences of Black and Indigenous people, as these identities continue to experience systems of oppression unique to the oppression that non-Black and non-Indigenous people of color face. During Women's History Month, it is important to have a conversation about this difference and how that has played out for us on WashU's campus and beyond. Along with that, I'm also just very excited to get into these lies that have been told to us as women about what it means to be ourselves. I'm also excited to hear about what panelists have to say about BIPOC, BIPOC as an acronym. It is a novel term, and I'm going to acknowledge that to some it is pretty controversial. And so we're going to talk about that in its terminology as an identity marker. And I just think it's really good to hear from the people who the acronym is supposed to be representing, what they think about it and how they feel about it. So I'm really excited for that part of the conversation as well. I also want to preface this conversation by saying that this is a safe space. And I also want to show gratitude to all of the Black, Indigenous, and women of color that came before me. That made it possible for Black women like my peers and I to inhabit and take up space at such an elite institution like Washington University. And they did that by being radical, by fighting for civil rights, by fighting for gender expansive rights, by fighting for immigration rights, and women's rights and so forth. And I would not be here without you all. So I just wanted to take that moment to honor them and show gratitude. I identify as a cisgender, able-bodied young Black woman, and I recognize that myself and the panelists cannot speak for all BIPOC women, but I really do hope that BIPOC women who may be watching this can really take something from this conversation. And if they can watch this and then go on about their day feeling a little bit more heard, a little bit more understood, and a little bit more represented, then I think that's great. That's all I want to achieve. That would be phenomenal. So let's get into it. And so today we're going to engage with 4 panelists who have wisdom way beyond their years. So how it's going to work is I'm going to briefly introduce a panelist, and then I'll allow them to further introduce themselves and give them the space to do that. And so we can get started. Our next panelist is Nana. Nana is a junior student in computational biology at WashU. Nana, I've always just admired you, and especially with your work for WashU Students for Abolition. And I'm especially happy to hear your takes on BIPOC and our experiences in our conversation. So we can get started. Oh, actually, you can give me your name, your pronouns, and however else you feel comfortable identifying yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name is Nana Jamaa, but I go by Nana. I'm a junior here at WashU, like you said, studying computational biology. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Amazing. Okay, we can get started. So the acronym BIPOC or BIPOC, referring to Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, first appeared around 2013 and has become more widespread in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. Doing your part in spreading information about marginalized identities is important, but doing all of the research for people can be counterproductive. BIPOC is an acronym for Black and Indigenous People of Color. Again, how do you feel about this acronym and in what ways does it or does it not represent you?
I think that acronym kind of comes out of this like wave of trying to like essentialize minoritized identities. Obviously, the intent is benevolent, placing an emphasis on the struggles of Black and Indigenous people within the context of the struggles of non-white people at large. I think difficulty comes in trying to sort of aggregate all the experiences of those people. Um, Obviously, we need a term to address the issue of the challenges that are faced by individuals that hold minoritized identities. But the issue comes in when we paint broad strokes using that term, right? Even between like Black and Indigenous peoples, our struggles are unique in many ways and overlap in many facets, but there's a lot of nuance to all of our struggles, you know. The violence of settler colonialism that is faced by the Indigenous peoples of the Americas is similar to the violence of the transatlantic slave trade, for example, but different in important and consequential ways. And so I think as long as we acknowledge those differences, those nuances, and allow these communities have like the agency to define their stories, then obviously like that's fine. But you know, when we talk about Black issues, we should be able to name it as a Black issue. If we're talking about Indigenous issues, we should be able to name it as such.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that answer. I do see BIPOC as a really novel term and it being very problematic for people. And I agree. I do think it has like a really positive intentions, but can be negatives, in which I think it like, you know, goes back to recentering whiteness. And I do think that we should get specific as we possibly can when talking about a specific issue or experience.
Right.
So thank you for that. I think a lot of people can identify with that too. So I think getting into our next question, since we both go to WashU,
Yeah.
so very complex. So attending a predominantly white institution has many challenges, and it can be hard to navigate your identity. We all live different lives and gain insight from navigating these spaces. How did you navigate power structures early in your academic experience or career versus later in your academic experience when you had a more formal leadership role on campus or in your work?
Yeah, I think something that I encountered pretty early on, I like to call it like a reverse imposter syndrome almost, in the sense that, you know, we have conversations about imposter syndrome all the time, like this feeling that one, you know, does not belong in the environments that you find yourself. But that's not something that I struggled with personally. Like coming to Wash U, I never really felt the sensation that I wasn't supposed to be here. Like, and it's not coming from a place of cockiness or anything like that. It's just like, you know, facts. Like I know the work that I put in to come here. I know my GPA and my test scores. But what I encountered when I got here was kind of the presumption that I felt like an imposter. Other people kind of assuming that as a Black woman at an elite, predominantly white institution, that I should feel like I don't belong here. Others deciding that I should have imposter syndrome even when I don't, and projecting that onto me. And that kind of, you know, I got it from professors, I got it from advisors, people saying things like, oh, are you sure you want to take this science class? Are you sure you want to be a STEM major? And it's like, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure I can take the class. I'm sure I can get an A in it. And I did time and time again. And so at the beginning, that was slightly difficult for me because it felt like I knew I was capable, but the people around me weren't, you know, were almost like not buying it, kind of expecting me to fail before I even started. And so over time, just becoming really solid in my own confidence, being extremely self-assured, knowing that I do have the ability to succeed in these spaces that weren't necessarily constructed for me, but I'm here and I'm going to make them my own and I'm going to create my success. And that's been really important for me, being sure of my morals and like my value system and having a internal compass to guide me as I encounter these new spaces. So now that I'm like approaching my last year here, that's what's been most important to me. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my God, I love the answer. I can definitely identify with that. Um, yeah, personally, I did not have any imposter syndrome about WashU. Like I put in the work to get here and I'm
Yeah.
doing very well.
Exactly.
Um, I think that's just how it is. And then I think that I um from an underclassman, I definitely gravitated towards other people who didn't have imposter syndrome. And then I
Right.
definitely get that people around us who were not, for example, Black women, were definitely projecting that experience of that we don't belong here, even though I definitely felt that I did. And I've told the story, I'm gonna tell it again because it's just like, wow. And I think it like perfectly like encompasses what you're saying. So my first year, I was in a res college that was not my own, and I asked this group of white girl students where the bathroom was, and they were like, instead of responding where the bathroom is, they asked me, "Do you go here?"
Yep.
What do you
I,
mean?
I actually remember when that happened. I remember running to you in BD afterwards and you telling me about it. Ugh,
Oh my
it's
God,
so
yes. And it's so weird because I don't have any imposter syndrome. So I'm just like, what? Like, you really think I don't go here? My grades are probably better than yours. But
exactly. That's
exactly.
that's what it is. And it shows up in so many ways. And that definitely was frustrating.
Exactly. And not to put any I don't know, anything on grades, but I'm still unlearning that
Right.
academia is just
Yeah.
but still. So thank you for that answer. And I think a lot of people can identify with that too. I also wanted to hear your thoughts about this term. So, as students, we're familiar with this term, the grind, which refers to people only being valuable by how much work they produce. And for students, that work is often academic and campus community work. How does the grind look different for BIPOC women?
I think it's difficult in the sense that, like, in a lot of ways, we don't allow women of non-white identities the chance to make mistakes. I think what I've seen here at WashU is that a lot of people have the opportunity to sort of like fail upwards. Even if they don't have the skills, they might get into a situation that they don't succeed, but somebody believes in them and picks up on those traits and allows them further opportunities to advance. And I think for women in general, but also particularly non-white women, we have one shot. You need to show up and you need to do well at your first time at bat, or that's kind of it. And so that kind of stress is really difficult when you kind of enter a space and there's already a presumption that you're not going to be able to perform. That additional mental stress can lead to anxieties that you might not have had prior. And this idea that the only way that people can, succeed or be valuable in this context is through having the best grades or having the longest CV. it's damaging to individuals that, you know, for example, might be first generation college students and don't have parents to ask to get advice as to, you know, how to secure that internship, how to go to office hours even, and to ask for help. There's a lot of privilege in even having the prior knowledge of how to navigate these academic spaces. And so sometimes I really ask that we challenge that, you know, and we interrogate that. A lot of, you know, aspects of academia are sort of relics of an archaic time. And I would say in a lot of ways, they don't fit anymore. They're slightly anachronistic. And so now that we're in a new era, I ask that we sort of introspect and consider whether there's a better way to do this. Like, is there a better way to learn or have people exhibit their skills than, you know, making themselves sick, going on binges in the library, trying to study for finals? Like, is that the only way that individuals can exhibit their academic prowess? Kind of just a thought there. I think we need to sort of approach a more holistic view of doing this, you know, project of academia.
Thank you, Nana. Oh my God. Wow. You said so many things. I think what I'm gonna attempt to respond to was your mention of first gen students, and I think that a lot of it is definitely cultural. And I think for BIPOC women, there's definitely like a lack of, I don't know if I want to say a lack of boundaries between academic life and then possibly family life, and how we're taught that we have to be twice as good, um, as you mentioned as well, and how that kind of like seeps into academic life and not knowing or having or struggling to navigate um, yourself as a student and yourself as someone who has many standards to uphold. So
Right.
that's an excellent answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also wanted to hear your thoughts about just more on BIPOC, because
Yeah.
again, it is really complicated. So BIPOC becomes complicated as the term works to recenter anti-Blackness and the erasure of Indigenous people. How should diversity and inclusion workers, like the CDI, for example, effectively create solidarity for Black, Indigenous, and women of color while respecting individual identifying stories at WashU?
I think really the key is to allow individuals of these communities to write their own stories, because that's an opportunity that has been, you know, stripped from us by hundreds of years of systemic oppression. We lack agency in a lot of these spaces. It's often individuals telling us what we should need and what we should want, and not always Black and Indigenous people at the helm of creating these initiatives, you know. And there's no lack of that, especially at WashU. There's, you know, plenty of Black students that have expressed where they feel like they're being failed and where we would like the university to step up for us. And it's a question of, you know, are we going to be ignored because the university doesn't like those answers? Well, yeah, obviously that's a possibility. Obviously there's a lot of, you know, vested and confounding interests. And so it's, I think having integrity, like when we ask these questions and like being willing to possibly get answers that we might not like, is really going to be important. Um, it's really crucial that we are the ones shaping these initiatives, because obviously we know our community is the best. We know the nuances and the ins and outs of what it is to navigate WashU as individuals of minoritized identities. And I think that is an expertise that is often undervalued, because, you know, we're undergrads, we're graduate students, we don't have decades long careers behind us, but we know what our lives are. And so valuing that input, I think, would go really, really far.
For sure, for sure. I think like you, I just wish I knew the answer. But I do know that there's so many things that the university could be doing.
Right.
The university has so much money,
Yeah.
and I think that something I would add to the conversation, because students, the university should be allowing students to tell these stories, because we are the culture in the university, and so I think that because the university has so many resources and just they have like a social responsibility to not just WashU's campus, but to the
Absolutely.
greater St. Louis campus.
Absolutely.
I think that the university should set the example.
Yep.
Um, and
100%.
from that, students can do the work they need to do. I think that makes it easier for student life and for students to be running these organizations. If the university would, I don't know, pitch in a
Yeah.
little bit more in caring, then I think that kind of takes the weight off for BIPOC people, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color on
100%.
WashU's campus. So,
No, for sure. I feel like even just one example for that is like, for example, like the bias reporting system at our university. I mean, it's far from perfect, as many people can attest, as somebody that has like attempted to utilize it because of instances that I've experienced. It just doesn't go very far. Like even starting from like my first semester as a freshman, I experienced a racist incident that had me questioning my own safety in my dorm. And when it was reported to my resident advisor and eventually my RCD, nothing happened.
wow.
And so even just like, and instances that followed when I utilized the more formal bias reporting system, that was always the outcome, that nothing happened. And so it's difficult having like a full plate of courses and also the additional anxiety of racial and gender-based discrimination, just not knowing whether the university is going to have my back in that instance. It's an additional form of labor, honestly, trying to get through that.
Oh my goodness. Yes, you've said so much. I was gonna say something, but if it comes back, I'll
Yeah.
probably try to bring it up. But thank you for the answer.
Mhm.
So our next question is more so about spaces on college campuses. So because BIPOC women are marginalized, it is easy to feel like we're walking through life alone. What are some factors that have helped boost your resilience, and what advice do you have for BIPOC women to find their safe, celebratory spaces on college campuses and beyond?
I think it's a difficult answer because not everybody finds community in the same ways, right? And I think I was extremely fortunate to have a really wonderful freshman roommate who is also a Black woman. And we just instantly had that friendship and that community, and we're able to um, kind of fall into lifelong friendships during our freshman year. And that's an experience that I truly value. I also found a great deal of community amongst women in science, because that's kind of where I find myself, and that communal bonding of the difficulties
Oh,
that we go
science.
through. I know, and I feel like, and I'm sure you can attest to this, I feel like the Black community at WashU, in a lot of ways, we can lean on each other. And that was something that I can't say I really like sought out. I was just kind of fortunate to fall into it. And so I think kind of putting ourselves in spaces where we know that we will be valued for like simply existing, where we're not going to be tokenized, where individuals are going to appreciate our differences and our nuances, without, making it feel like we have to prop up our identities to find acceptance, if that makes sense. I think that is really crucial. Just finding people that value you for you.
Mhm.
Um, and it can be difficult to actualize that. And I know that's not necessarily practical advice, but that's kind of what my experience has been.
Mhm. Amazing. Yeah, I can definitely attest to how, I don't know, just how inviting and warm the majority of Black WashU is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something really special. I think it's just a great space, and something that as a student at a Black student at a PWI, I think you have to put yourself out there at some point, or you will not meet the communities that you need to, because they're not as visible on campus.
Right.
So I think some other things that have helped boost my resilience is self care. I think as BIPOC women, as a Black woman, I need self care the most. I think that, yeah, I think that um, I guess the society has, I don't know, made self-care a very capitalized thing. So I think to combat that, I think of those who are not as economically sound,
Mhm.
um, those who are disenfranchised, marginalized communities, we need self-care the most. So I think that I learned a lot about that in college and just taking the time to um, rest. Um, because as I got into a lot of campus organizations and I wasn't getting paid for them, so it was just like a lot. It was just like a lot of labor, and I realized like,
Absolutely.
I have bags under my eyes, not
Right.
because of not just because of the work that I'm my classwork, but because of campus work that I'm not really getting paid for. So
Yeah.
it took a lot of me just to say I need to rest. We can't do this meeting today,
That's so
and just saying no to a lot of
right.
things.
Right.
Letting someone else do it is fine. The world is not going to end if you can't do something. Um, and I also wanted to go back to your point about the bias support system. I'm not really sure. Just conversating with my other college friends who go to different universities. I don't think every university has like a bias reporting system like WashU does. And
Yeah.
I think that as elite as WashU is, they can be doing a lot more to influence other universities to do the same thing. And so I think that um, just knowing that the university cares about me and my students and students who look like me is something that has helped boost my resilience or just allow me to be myself on campus. So I think that's something really good. And also join an organization. I was the president of Queens, and we worked really hard, that exec board, and I know the current exec board of Queens is working really phenomenal,
Really hard.
to
Yeah.
make that, yeah, to make that a safe space for Black identifying women, and like making that affinity space what it needs to be for students. So I think that you have to, again, you have to put yourself out there to find
100%.
these spaces because they are there. There are students that are making them happen. So
100%. Yeah. I was also last year, I was on the executive board for the African Students Association. And it was the same thing. Like, we are fortunate to be amongst a community of people that really care about each other. And sometimes it's really just taking that step forward to engage with that community and also to some extent being that for other people, you know. Most of us have very good intentions, you know, most of us just want to make friends. And so if you can be the person to say, yeah, you can like borrow my calculator for your exam. Somebody's going to do that for you
it's
as
the
well.
math, girl. It's the math examples. I
Just
cannot
the first
relate.
thing that came to my head. And not that these relationships need to be transactional, but you know, community is a verb. It's about doing that for others and knowing that others will be there for you. So that's definitely what I found as well.
For sure, for sure. Thank you. I also wanted to get into these lies about what we as women have been told about what it means to be ourselves. And I say lie. I know lie has a really negative connotation,
Yeah,
but I'm using it how it is because these lies usually come from um, either people who do not identify as women,
right.
or if they are women, they have been so influenced by patriarchy and misogyny. So we need to get into them and how um, I guess just like take a moment to unlearn them. So, what is a lie that you have been told about what it means to be a woman?
Wow. Can I even pick one? I think when I was younger, I used to be a major tomboy. Oh my God, like in elementary and middle school.
Really?
You like probably would not guess about me. But I really did not, I sort of rejected femininity in some ways, and not because I didn't feel like I wanted to be feminine. It was that, you know, in retrospect, I can identify that as internalized misogyny that told me that femininity was weakness. That's really what I thought, that if I embraced, you know, traditionally like girly things, then I would have to compromise some of my own you know, beliefs about my strength and my confidence. Especially somebody that kind of like gravitated to male dominated fields like of science. It felt like I wouldn't be able to, you know, be a scientist and like wear skirts or wear makeup or this, that, and the third. And now I've come into a place where I've realized I identify my femininity as power. It's something that really pushes me forward. And also coming to the realization that there's not just one way to be a woman. Like my manner of being a woman, my manner of femininity is mine and something that I create for myself and is a part of my story. And that can be different for someone else. So embracing that entire spectrum of womaninity, including our trans brothers and sisters in that definition, our non-binary siblings in that definition, like not being constrained by our traditional heteropatriarchal ideas of femininity. That's been extremely powerful for me. Especially sort of diverging from Western ideals of the gender binary, and especially, you know, within like the capitalist system, like what it means to be a hardworking woman. That has been extremely like empowering for me, like grounding my ideas of femininity also in ideas of like community and like working to build, you know, my people. Taking a page out of the notes of women who I identify as like extremely powerful and confident, and who did it all the while, you know, embracing their femininity. That's been important for me. And so just rejecting really that lie that you can't be both powerful and feminine.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that, Nana. And I just wanted to say you're such a powerful force on campus. Like every time I see you, I'm just like, oh my God, there she is. I don't know, but you're doing great, my friend. You're doing great. I think a lot that I've been told, one of them has a lot to do with like femininity and then confidence. And we teach girls to shrink themselves.
Yeah.
Here's another short anecdote, but I used to do dancing when I was young, and I'm not going to call them out, but I feel like you can guess. But one of my parents was kind of upset with me because I was like a dance rehearsal and I was just feeling myself, really liking my hair that day. And then all of the dance parents were just staring. And then my parent was like, you need to stop doing that. Like you're doing a lot right now. Kind of like shrinking me. And I don't really necessarily blame that parent for that because I know that, you know, everybody is influenced by like the patriarchy and like how women aren't supposed to be confident. So it's just really sad how we've been that's been forced on us for so long and so little. And I was very young. So
you internalize that.
Yes. And I think it's completely fine. Like now, confidence is always something that I'm just striving for. Like I want all of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's something that we should try to teach girls and people who identify as women, teach them that very young, because we deserve that. So thank you so much, Nana. Is there anything else that you want people who look like you to know? Are there any projects that you're working on?
So right now there's a few projects that I want to work on that I am currently working on. One thing though, a word that I will leave for women of minoritized identities is really getting rooted in a community, and kind of divesting from the idea that our liberation is going to come from a top-down institution or a power. There's so much agency and power simply in the individuals that are around us and within ourselves, and we can do so much when we invest in our communities. When you take the step to help your neighbor, there's so much that you can do to improve the material conditions of others with your own two hands. That's really what I implore us all to do, is figure out how we can get plugged in and do something for the communities that we care about today, because it can be small but it can go extremely far. Things that I'm working on right now, Currently, something that's been really important to me is this concept of science advocacy. So obviously I'm a STEM major. I really, really love science and I love what I do. But unfortunately, science literacy is a privilege. And in the light of the pandemic, we've seen how a lack of science literacy is literally costing lives, particularly amongst Black communities, minoritized communities. And women. We see that women are actually bearing the brunt of the side effects of this coronavirus and the vaccine. And in a lot of ways, we are kind of getting lost in the numbers. And so a project that I'm working on, more in the academic field is identifying how the experiences of Black women, faculty in the academic sciences, and I'm hoping that's later going to translate to like a broader conversation of what science means for minoritized communities and how we're permitted to interact with the sciences that, in a lot of ways have subjugated and marginalized and intentionally left out people that look like me. And so that's a very broad answer, but kind of the direction that I'm going in right now.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Fran. Oh my goodness.
Thank
Wow.
you.
How can people connect with you?
Mm-hmm. You can connect with me via Instagram. I'm sure my handle will be included in the promotional stuff. My email is nkusi@wustl.edu. If somebody would like to connect with me, I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that fun stuff. And I'm always welcome to talk and get to know anybody. I love meeting new people. So definitely don't have any reservations if you'd like to talk to me with me further about anything that we hashed out today.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much, Nana, for having this conversation with me. I've always wanted to do something like this.
Yeah.
And sometimes I let my anxiety get the best of me, but
no, you did so well.
Was great. This was great.
It was so good. Thank you so much for having this space. And I know it was a little bit of extra work on your part, but you did wonderfully. Thank you for giving us this platform.
Thank you. Of course. Okay.